Does the average person commit theft because they're starving or they're in need? Or are they simply opportunists? Or maybe there's a reason you've never thought of before. In my 20-year policing career, I've investigated hundreds, if not thousands, of shoplifting and theft calls. I've done grocery stores, department stores, every item you can think of, theft of gas calls from gas stations, which seems to be on the rise, by the way. I've investigated it all. So out of all those calls, of all the cases, there was only one I was able to confirm that the person was genuinely in need and desperate. And she was stealing groceries from a grocery store and the bare necessities as well. She was not charged. She was let go, given a warning, which is often the case. Now, that's not to say that there were not more who were genuinely in need and not just looking to score something cool that they wanted. But we weren't able to confirm that because they were larger items. Maybe they would have sold them online. Who knows? When I was a teenager, I got caught too, shoplifting. And listen, I hate to say this, but it's almost kind of normal to rebel a little bit, to push the limits, okay? That's not an excuse, but it's somewhat normal. And listen, for those of you thinking about applying to a position in law enforcement, you better disclose everything, because I had to disclose this as well. You better disclose everything. If you don't, if you try to hide something, you're finished. You're done, kicked out of the process. A lot of crimes are simply crimes of opportunity. I'm not making excuses here, okay? But some people just often act on their impulses. They're not mature enough, whatever the case is. Kind of similar to you're walking down the sidewalk with a bunch of friends and there's a rock there. You pick up the rock. Next thing you know, a few doors down, that rock's going through somebody's window. If the rock wasn't there, it wouldn't have happened. You're young, you're stupid. It should not have happened, but it did. So shoplifting or theft excuses, I've heard them all. And some of them kind of surprised me. And the only reason why they surprised me is because they were used on one occasion when I've never heard them before that. So for example, teen girls being caught stealing items of clothing from a department store, but they were items of clothing that their family members would have never let them purchase or wear because of religious reasons, religious restrictions. Now, I never would have heard of that before. So on a side note, if you're underage, you're not an adult and you're caught shoplifting by loss prevention, whoever, you're brought into the office, you're technically in custody and the police have to come and finish that off. Your parents or guardian are going to be contacted and you will not be released on your own. It's got to be to an adult or parent or guardian. So be prepared. All right, now I'm going to make excuses again for theft, and I'm sure some people will have an issue with it. My grandma, but I'm going to take this back many years. My grandma grew up very, very poor. They came from a very large family in the country, which was quite often the case, and they had nothing. They lived with my great-grandfather who fought in the war and continued with many battles until the day he died. They had nothing. They would often steal vegetables and fruits from gardens, from neighbors' gardens. Everybody had gardens back then. And when it went into town, they would steal clothes from the clothing line. And she would tell me these stories when I was a teenager. They would steal clothes. They would steal what she called the necessities of life. And she didn't consider it stealing. They never considered it theft back then. To them, it was survival. It was a mode of survival. And to be honest with you, I agree 100%. They never had the resources back then like they do these days where you could get assistance, or food banks where you could go and get food. Back then, it was survival. And I'll put it like this. These days, if they never had those resources, these days, the food banks or other ways to receive support, what do you think would be happening? The same thing would be happening. So thank goodness there are these resources in place. And listen, I'm just going to take an opportunity to say that the food banks, from what I understand, are very low. They need assistance. Please do your best. If you have anything to give when you're shopping, wherever, please consider donating to your local food bank. And yeah, there are resources these days, but I also see more and more people seem to be forced from their homes. They're losing their homes or losing their jobs. The prices of everything is skyrocketing. And when there's kids involved, again, when there's kids involved and you got to look after your family, you're going to do what it takes. So again, please give generously if you're able to food banks. So listen, folks, thank you so much for paying attention. I really appreciate it. If you want to add anything to the conversation, please do so. I read every comment and I respond when it's appropriate. And sometimes I take things to the next level. As you know, or you might know, I'm also an Ontario Human Rights Commissioner, which is something I'm very proud of, and I do take these matters up. So thank you. Please leave a comment. Until then, be safe Look after one another, and perhaps we will see you again.